In this video, I will show you how to reinstall the thread take-up system and the needle bar, and then check the timing of the hook on your Singer Featherweight. Okay, to start, I will go over the parts you're going to need to reinstall the thread take-up system, which is what we have to do first before we can put the needle bar back in. You have the thread take-up system. This was called the thread take-up lever complete, I believe. You'll notice here it has this part that spins. This little stud coming out is what goes into the counterbalance. There is a connecting link, and I'll show you how we put this onto this stud. There's a set screw that's going to secure this stud inside the counterbalance, and then you'll have a hinge screw and a washer, and I'll show you how we put those in. You will want to oil these parts. Here is a hole. Down here, spin it around, is another hole. Put oil in those holes. Give them a good spin. We're also going to oil up this stud at some point. Inside the connecting link is not a bad place to oil either. So let me set up a little bit differently, and I'm going to show you how we assemble this before we try to put it back in the machine. Okay, so you see we're looking in the nose of the machine. This here is the bushing that the needle bar slides into, and it's sort of in our way as we work. So don't get frustrated. Just, it might take you a couple tries, because there's really, you don't want to take this out if you don't have to. It's not an easy job. This little hole here in the counterbalance is where this stud on the take-up system is going to slide into. And then also this hole is where this hinge screw is going to go. So before we just slide this on, what we want to do is we want to take that connecting link, and it needs to go back on this stud. So oil up the stud. Then hold the thread take-up system in your hand, and do you see how this part that we actually are going to eventually run thread through, do you see how it comes out like this? That is going to come out towards you, and the stud is going to point away from you. The link has this longer portion and this shorter portion. The shorter portion is what goes onto the stud, with the longer portion pointing towards you, just like that. Now, it would make sense to go ahead and add this screw here and then work all this into the machine, but trust me, it can be done that way. This is so much easier. We can add the stud after the fact. What we're going to worry about is this washer being in place, because when this goes together, first the hinge screw goes inside the thread take-up system, then the washer is actually up against the body of the machine. But if you try to work all these parts in with that real tiny bit of clearance you have here, you will pull your hair out. So we're not going to worry about that yet. So my goal is to get this stud into this hole. And it's just a little tricky. There it goes. It's in the hole. Now, before I push it all the way back, I want to get that washer up behind this part of the linkage and get my hinge screw in. And I find that it's easier to set the machine up on its nose now that I have this inside the counterbalance. So now I can slide this washer right behind that part of the thread take-up system. And if you have a screwdriver or paintbrush handle, you can kind of line up all the holes. And see, then you don't have gravity working against you. And you can go ahead and get that started. Don't tighten this down all the way though. Let's just sort of get it started, leaving a little bit left to be tightened. So this is tightened down, not all the way, and my stud is in the hole in the counterbalance. Before I put the set screw in, I need to make sure that the flat spot is turned to the right direction so I can see it through this hole in the counterbalance, which I'm going to show you. If I do not have this flat spot showing, just in case you can't see it when I adjust it, this little slot right here, if you use a screwdriver, you can turn it and it will rotate the screw inside the counterbalance so you can get that flat spot facing in the right direction. So to put that set screw in, we have to work through the back. And one thing to point out, I want you to remember when you're rotating the hand wheel so that you can access the set screw through this hole here, this linkage is going to get in your way. It's going to hang up on different parts of the machine. So you might want to kind of keep your finger on it so you can completely do a full rotation with the hand wheel to line everything up. So just be aware of that. This will catch on things. Okay, so now we are looking through the back of the machine, and you can see, first of all, the hole that's in my counterbalance. And then you can also see, you see that metal flashing there? It's because I'm spinning that screw that I just showed you a little bit. I can see the flat spot right now. If I were to turn it too far, it wouldn't show anymore. So I've lined up the hole in the counterbalance perfectly with the hole here, and I can see my flat spot. Now is when I want to go ahead and put that set screw in. So I want to show you something real quick. I use all different kinds of screwdrivers. I have my handy Chapman set, and my favorite set of just everyday screwdrivers were magnetic at some point, and then one day they just weren't. I think this was like a painted on tip or something. It all wore off. So this little tool, and I think you can find them in a lot of hardware stores. I found it on Amazon. You can remagnetize the tips of your screwdrivers, and it's literally, you just put the tip inside. When you pull it out, it is magnetized again, and it won't last forever, but it definitely will last long enough for you to put that set screw on the end of your screwdriver and and get it into the hole perfectly. So hopefully the angle of the camera doesn't mess this up too much. But I'm just getting it, hopefully, into the hole. Trying to keep this in focus. See if I can get this started now. Yep, it started. So what I'm going to do is now that I have it in, I'm going to go ahead and tighten it down, being very careful not to move anything. I know my flat spot is in the right place right now. And I want to tighten this all the way down. And it might help to hold the counterbalance still with your fingers, but tighten that down. Now we can go ahead and tighten the other screw. So we're looking in the nose, and you can see how this hangs up on things. But if you hold it still, you can spin your hand wheel. We want to go ahead and tighten this screw down while we're turning that hand wheel, which isn't easy if this is catching on things. But for some reason, it just helps keep any binding away. So I'm just slowly spinning. It got stuck until I feel like this is nice and tight. And it is. And now when I spin this, everything spins smoothly. I have made sure that when I put this all in, that this was pushed firmly up against the counterbalance. This doesn't slide back and forth at all. And this screw is flush against the take-up with the washer behind it, with no gaps here either. So now we can install the needle bar. So before we install the needle bar, let's go over the parts that we're going to need. You're going to need your needle bar. Make sure that you have cleaned out this portion of the needle bar really well. If you still have old lint and oil in here, it will cause problems with just getting the needle in and out and then tightening it down properly. So make sure that's nice and clean. This is the needle bar clamp and screw, and this screw is a little chewed up. I did polish it up, but I have a new one coming. We can use it today so you can see how this all works. Then you have the needle clamp, and there's 4 little parts. You have the needle clamp and the thumb screw. Then you also have this little jib, which has a thread guide on it too. And this little portion, it is what gets tightened down and pushed down against the needle by this thumb screw and locks your needle in place. Last, you have this tiny little screw which actually holds the entire needle clamp on the needle bar. And believe it or not, just that little tiny button on the back. Do you see that? That's what holds this whole part on. So you're going to need that as well. So let's go ahead and get this needle bar back in. So here's our connecting link, and the first thing that we want to do is we want to take the needle bar clamp and get it back into the connecting link. And you do want to oil this up before you slide it into the connecting link, and you're just going to slide it in just like that. Now we can go ahead and slide the needle bar back down into the bushing, and we are going to slide it through the top up here, through this hole, and then through the needle bar clamp, and then through this hole here, which is actually another bushing, and then we can tighten it down. So oil up your needle bar, and I'm just sliding it in the top. The portion that the needle bar clamp goes onto at the bottom is what goes in first. Sliding it through the bushing. And now when you have it through the bushing, and listen, if you didn't clean this out and you're getting resistance when you're trying to get the needle bar through this bushing, use a cotton swab, run it back through there. Make sure that you have no debris inside this bushing. Then also make sure there's plenty of oil right here on the end. Now, the next thing I need to do is I need to line it up with the needle bar clamp. If you have this spun the wrong way, you won't know it until you start to want to use the machine. So do you see how we have the hole for the needle bar clamp screw? If you have it pointing this way, you'll get everything back together just fine, but it's going to bump up against the tension pin releasing lever, and it will stop you from having everything work properly. So this needs to be turned this way, pointing towards the back of the machine. You're going to slide the needle bar through that, and then finally down through the last little short bushing. Okay? Now, once you have this in, it should slide freely inside both of those bushings, and it should turn freely. What I do at this point is I add my screw for the needle bar clamp, and I don't tighten it down all the way, but if this is really slippery and I can't even keep this needle bar up, then just putting in the screw now and just tightening it a little bit will hold it in place. This needle bar clamp in particular is, I believe, a little bit like crimped together. So it's really holding on to that needle no problem. But normally your needle bar should just slide freely in and out. But that's something I noticed about this clamp when I was cleaning it. It looks like it was sort of crimped together. So my needle bar isn't sliding all over the place. Now, once we have our needle bar through this bushing, the needle bar clamp with the screw hole side pointing towards the back of the machine, and the needle bar through this last bushing here, we can go ahead and set the height of the needle bar. So we're going to turn our hand wheel and we're going to watch as this clamp reaches its lowest position. Do you see that? It kind of hits the lowest and it starts to come back up. I'm finding that lowest position. Now I'm looking at my needle bar. I have two lines here, one on the top and then one right after it. I'm going to take my needle bar, and I just want that first line just disappearing inside this bushing when this is down at its lowest point. The other thing I'm looking for is, do you see on my needle bar, there's a little line right here. Hey, you know what? There's a little line right there. If I line up both of those lines, then my needle bar should be turned in the proper direction when I put my needle bar clamp on and everything, that my needle is going in up and down at the right angle. It's not twisted one way or the other. That line is there to help you. So what are we doing? We have the thread take up going at the lowest position, and we do that by using the hand wheel. We're checking this line to make sure that it's just ready to disappear into the bushing, and it is. This line is matched up. Now I'm going to tighten this screw down all of the way. And I hold my hand wheel still just so nothing moves and I get it nice and tight. So now let me double check my work. Using my hand wheel, look how smoothly that turns, by the way. But anyway, using my hand wheel, it's at its lowest point, and you can see that line is just getting ready to go up into the bushing. So I have set the height of my needle bar, and I'll know if this really is truly all good when we get the rest of this together and check the timing of the hook, which is what we're going to do next. Now we have to attach our needle clamp. So first, take the clamp and the thumb screw and go ahead and start that thumb screw into the clamp. And if you notice any resistance and this doesn't want to spin on freely, check down in that hole and make sure there isn't any rust or anything that you need to clean out. But putting this in is going to give you a little bit of extra help whenever you're trying to slide this all onto the needle bar. Now what we're going to do is holding it. Okay, look, do you see this side? Do you see this side? Do you see this funny little cutout? That funny little cutout's going to face towards the front of your machine. Okay, so here's the front of my machine. Here's that funny little cutout. I'm holding it like that, and I'm taking the jib, and do you see that little score mark there? This is what presses up against your needle right there. And with this turned like this towards the front of the machine, I'm going to just drop that jib down into this little hole right in here. It fits perfectly, just like that. Then I'm going to just slide it right onto my needle bar. Now we can put this little screw on and secure everything into place. So you should see the little tiny hole right here. That is where this little tiny button on this side of the screw is going to go. And that's going to hold everything in place. And you just kind of keeping it centered, rest your screw in. And really the best way to start this is with your fingers, and you will feel it catch into the threads. Then you can tighten it down. And everything will go right into place. This should not be wiggly or jiggly at all on the needle bar. This shouldn't spin around at all. While I'm at it, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that I tightened this enough as well. Okay, now let's see if the timing of the hook is right, and then we're done installing the thread take-up in the needle bar. So just a standard needle works best for checking the hook timing on the featherweight. You want to relieve the tension on this thumb screw here, and you're going to take your standard needle with the flat side pointing out, and you're going to slide it up into the needle bar and hold it in place while you tighten this thumb screw back down. Just like that. Now, before I go crazy, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slowly spin my hand wheel. This is important that you do this. Remember, you took this off and you took the hook entirely off. So the first time you run a needle in this machine, I want you to do this very slow. We're going to let the needle come down and back up. Let's do it one more time. Down, slowly, back up. Why am I doing that? Because if I had this installed improperly and this hook was way off, that needle will come down and hit the case on this whole entire hook assembly. It could break, it could come flying out at you. So always that first couple passes, slowly, carefully, just to be sure that everything is installed correctly. Then you can go ahead and spin it freely. So how do we check the timing of the hook? Okay, we know we checked the height, we set the height of the needle bar by having this top line, when this needle bar is at its lowest point, just disappearing inside this bushing. Well, to check the timing of the hook, what we do is we turn our hand wheel until this next line is starting to disappear into the bushing. Then we're going to look at where our hook point is in relation to our needle. Okay, you should be able to see the hook point now. Here is the jib point. The hook point's behind the jib point. Do you see this right here? Watch. The needle comes up, the hook comes around, it comes down, and I know you can't see the line disappearing into the bushing, but I want you to pay attention to the hook first. So I'm bringing that up so that line's just disappearing into the bushing. And do you see my hook point? It is directly in front of my needle. All right? It's not like this. Even that slight little bit, do you see how it's a tiny bit past? It's not like that. That slight little bit would mean that your hook timing is off. So I am lining up that line with the bottom of the bushing, and my hook point is directly in front of my needle. That's what I want. The timing is correct on this machine. Now, because of the length of this video already, I will do a separate video at some point to show you how to fix the timing of the hook. So let's review one more time. Needle's coming down. It's at its lowest point. It comes up. I'm watching this line. That line starts to disappear into the bushing, and the point of my hook is right in front of the needle. Well, I just spun it a little bit. There, right in front of the needle. The timing of the hook is correct on this machine. which I hope that is what you have found as well. So next, we can install the presser bar, and we will also get that tension pin releasing lever on in the next video as well. If you have questions, just leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye.